Welcome to this webinar on what applications are the best fit for Force.com. I'm Rob Chang, Director of Platform Product Marketing at Salesforce.com. Now, before we begin, I would like to remind everyone about our safe harbor statement. You should make purchasing decisions based solely on released products and features. More information can be found at the Investor Relations section of the Salesforce.com website. So Force.com is the leading cloud platform for business apps with over 160,000 applications, ranging from simple recruiting apps to sophisticated insurance claims processing and e-commerce applications. Many small and medium-sized companies are already running their entire businesses in the cloud, while larger enterprises, they frequently start at the edge by surrounding their more inflexible and legacy core systems with a layer of Force.com applications to deliver more agile and collaborative business processes. Now, when discussing the substantial cost and time-to-market advantages of cloud computing with customers, one of the first questions we often get is, well, okay, I get the 5 times faster, half the cost message, but where should I start? What kinds of apps is Force.com really good for? And what I found useful in these discussions is looking at the question from an architectural perspective and considering the data, logic, and user characteristics that make for a good Force.com application. So let's start at the data layer. Now, fundamentally, business applications that are a good fit for the relational database model tend to be a good fit for Force.com. In particular, an ideal app would primarily store and manage structured data and documents. Also, Force.com is best for medium to high value data, which means that from an access perspective, these apps will generally need robust security and access controls, as well as the ability to search, report on, and audit the data. And finally, these apps implement a well-defined object model with relationships that need referential integrity. In fact, Force.com helps developers maintain both data and application-level integrity. So, for example, it can prevent you from deleting objects that are referenced in formulas or workflows. Some examples of core app data that fit these characteristics include things like products and price books, materials and inventory levels, invoices, contracts, projects and tasks, or job candidates for recruiting apps. Now, by thinking about the converse of some of these guidelines, we can also get an idea of data that would not be such a good fit for Force.com. If, for example, instead of medium to high value data, your application primarily stores large amounts of low value data, such as multiple terabytes of logs or archived binary files that you don't need to regularly query or analyze, like perhaps the data just needs to be maintained for compliance reasons, and you don't mind having to expend a lot of resources for something like a case-by-case forensic investigation. In those examples, Force.com isn't really adding any particular advantages with its security and sharing model, with its access model. Those business-level features are not something that you're really taking advantage of. Also, Force.com doesn't offer any particular support for things like streaming of binary audio or video files. So for these use cases, it might be better to host those actual streaming files on another service such as Akamai or Amazon S3, and then perhaps use Force.com to manage the metadata around things like user downloads and tagging or reviewing. So if you take a look at the Force.com site's gallery, which is on the developer.force.com website, you can see a lot of examples of great applications that have been built on Force.com. One I wanted to highlight that's related to this topic, which is the application from Quest Software. They actually built a download manager which integrates Force.com with Akamai for actually hosting and streaming out those binaries to users. But when you actually look at information about, user authentication, logins, number of downloads, and that kind of information about customers and users, it's a natural fit for Force.com. Now, from a non-functional perspective, Force.com, as you may know, is a multi-tenant cloud platform. It runs on multiple global mirrored, professionally managed data centers that are connected with a dedicated path-diverse network backbone. We can easily keep data backed up, and we support near real-time replication, so we can perform seamless failovers if necessary. The service processes over 350 million transactions a day at under 300 milliseconds response times. Now, it probably goes without saying, but when even the internet backbone latencies can exceed 100 milliseconds, you probably don't want to be running any embedded or sub-millisecond sensor analysis type applications in the cloud, or even in a data center across the street when you really get down to it. Now, over the past year, Force.com has delivered 99.98% planned uptime. It provides service transparency by making both current and historical system status information publicly available on trust.salesforce.com. Force.com is also ISO 27001 certified, has undergone numerous comprehensive audits by security-conscious companies like Merrill Lynch, Kaiser Permanente, Symantec, and Cisco. In general, customers have found that the scalability, reliability, and security of our service tends to exceed what they've been able to provide with their own data centers. Now, the next layer of the application stack to consider is logic. And from a logic perspective, these applications tend to be focused on managing and automating business processes. And that includes both human approval processes, such as requiring VP approval to add a new material supplier to your supply chain, as well as data-driven workflows. So, automatically changing the order of an overdue invoice, or moving an open support case that hasn't been updated for a few days into a higher priority queue. These services provided by the platform make building things like forms, guided wizards, approval processes, validation rules, and workflows extremely fast. Often, these can be built with zero code. And when it is necessary to build some code, for example, to implement triggers or some data processing, Apex provides an elegant way to build programmatic logic tightly coupled to your data model for the kinds of things you would usually consider database stored procedures good for. Now, many of these applications also leverage things like SAML or delegated authority for single sign-on and take advantage of the Force.com API to integrate with on-premise applications, so like pulling master account data from SAP, or to external systems like an order management system integrating with FedEx for shipping information. And this integration is actually a very important part of the platform. The API actually handles over half of that 350 million transactions a day that's going through our service. So given these characteristics that are a good fit for application logic, here are some specific customer examples that actually represent a good fit. So expense applications for entering expenses and managing the approval flow for expenses, calculating the workload and the velocity, the amount of work that a project team actually is able to complete against the plan, things like managing help desk queues and escalations, processing of insurance quotes and insurance claims processing, and things like integrating out into social media applications, Facebook and Twitter, doing monitoring of your brand, monitoring of what your customers are saying about you in social media sites. These are all customer examples that are live today, built out successfully on Force.com. Now, similar to the data layer, on the logic layer, we can consider the converse of the good fit characteristics to get a better understanding of what not be such a good fit. So where applications that manage or automate business processes are a good fit, in contrast, more CPU-bound applications that are basically number crunchers, things like scientific simulations, or calculating millions of Fourier transforms to try to identify some interesting radio signals from deep space, or brute force decryption algorithms if you have a client that lost their passwords to all their important files, or multi-dimensional analysis. These are really not a good fit for the platform. Similarly, you wouldn't want to build a physics engine for your new video game on our platform. These use cases aren't really what Force.com was optimized for, and they don't really leverage many of the built-in business services of Force.com. Now, you may be familiar with the VMforce service we announced earlier this year. This is a joint offering between VMware and Salesforce.com, which is designed to make it easier to build and run enterprise Java apps in the cloud. Basically, it allows companies to leverage existing Java skills and assets, and also to take advantage of a managed Java stack, configuration-free database, and business services like reporting, all in the cloud. Now, when it comes to application use cases, many of the same guidelines apply. So the most common use cases that customers have identified include things like employee-facing internal business applications, customer-facing web applications, and obviously the ability to do integrations or extensions to their CRM applications using Java. All of these tend to have similar characteristics to the kinds of applications we've already discussed. Now, the final layer of the application architecture to consider is the user layer. Most Force.com applications need to manage adding, removing, and provisioning users, often with different views or levels of access to data. Now, they also need to understand things like roles and organizational hierarchy, so they can properly model and enforce sharing rules and approval processes, for example. These apps also need to provide intuitive user interfaces that are easy for business users to pick up and use with little or no training. Often these applications need to support a global community of employees or customers with localized languages and currencies. And whether it's for an inventory management app, sales calls, or financial forecasting, users are increasingly expecting and even demanding better mobile access, real-time feeds, and the ability to seamlessly collaborate on their business data and business processes. Now, these next generation applications, which we call Cloud 2 applications, are very easy to build on Force.com with all the integrated chatter and mobile services it provides. So considering those user management and user interface characteristics, there are actually a very wide variety of scenarios that are common to Force.com applications. And they range all the way from small businesses with non-technical users to enterprise-wide deployments across all employees in a large enterprise. Customers and partners, particularly via portal interfaces, the ability to do collaborative field servicing so that the technicians in a particular area can be notified of problems. This screenshot, for example, is from a ServiceMax application where they actually had healthcare devices that will send alerts if they have diagnostic issues or failures. And those alerts will show up in a chatter feed where both the reps in the field, the service techs in the field, as well as the technical experts back at HQ can collaborate on resolving those issues. Other common scenarios are basically any mobile or global employee sales force or mobile employee teams, pharmaceuticals, consumer packaged good retail, many other examples of this type of user employment. So if we can sort of look at the flip side of that, typically the very extreme user scenarios are the ones that don't fit really well with Force.com. We have customers such as Avon and Japan Post that run hundreds of thousands of internal users on their Force.com applications. Customers like Symantec or Medi with millions of authentic portal or website users. And so on one extreme, apps with very few or no end users, like data mining, video encoding applications, integration hubs, they're not taking advantage of the platform's security and user administration features. They're not necessarily going to be a very good fit, particularly if they don't have any users at all. System apps or integration hubs don't have any users, so they're not taking advantage of any of that capability. And on the other extreme, applications that need to handle, say, hundreds of millions of authenticated users a day probably aren't the best fit for our enterprise user management model. You probably don't want to build the next Gmail or Facebook on Force.com. So to review the ideal profile for a Force.com application, first of all, it's structured data. It needs relational database features, the ability to do querying, searching, analytics, reporting. Business processes, they're user-driven either through web app, mobile app, or the API. There may be users integrating, accessing an application on-premise or another cloud platform or application that through the API drives a process inside of the Force.com application. Wide range of user scenarios, employees, customers, partners, and then from a user interface perspective, again, the more you have a need for real-time feeds, mobile, collaborative type applications, the more obvious it becomes that Force.com is the right platform. I also want to draw attention to this URL at the bottom of the screen. We do have a list of, in addition to the sites gallery I showed you before, we have a list on the Force.com webpage of customer examples. So if we just scroll down to Force.com customer success stories, you can read all about dozens and dozens of different applications and application types that'll help you get an idea of what customers have done successfully on Force.com. How do you get started? Basically, the best step when you're really ready now to take your first Force.com application development and deployment project is really to talk to your account team and find out how they can help you take a look at your backlogs and identify what applications from your IT project backlogs might be a good fit for Force.com. They can help you select a good pilot application to try it out with Force.com, and then they can help you demonstrate the value of that application to your internal stakeholders to help you further enhance the ability of Force.com and Salesforce to help you with your IT projects and your IT applications. So thank you very much for attending this webinar, and have a great day.